All right, I think we got about a minute. Oh, 1 o'clock, cool. How's it going? Cool, cool. I just got to say, isn't Star Trek awesome? I've been here, coming here several years. Where else can you sit and listen to a bunch of cool tech stuff and then watch a movie full of superheroes? My superpower is pulling the post-lunch slot every single time I do this presentation. It never fails. I feel like, Patrick in that SpongeBob movie. I probably should have picked a better power. So, DevOps. So to keep you awake, we are going to have a little audience participation. So for starters, I got a couple questions for you. Raise your hand if you consider yourself primarily a developer. Of course. It's a developer conference, right? Okay. Next question. Raise your hand if you are now or ever have been ops. Operational support, patching, operating systems. At one point or another, if you're a developer, you've probably done some of that. All right, cool. All right, last question for now. Raise your hand if you've just heard for the first time about this DevOps thing within the last year. Okay, quite a few of you, yeah? Well, guess what? Me too. All right, my turn. Is that working? Not yet. There we go. All right, my name is Dave Swersky. I'm an enterprise architect with PNC Bank. I didn't bring my crazy multicolor wig today. If you saw the video earlier, you know what I'm talking about. PNC is based out of Pittsburgh. I'm in the Cleveland area. And almost exactly a year ago, I joined a new team at the Enterprise Architecture Division at PNC, focused on software development and delivery. Anything to do with systems and policies related to software development, this new team was going to take care of it. I'm talking to my new boss in early April, and he's saying, we're going to be doing source control and requirements management, ADLM, and continuous integration, deployment, and all this stuff. And he said at the time that our chief architect is wanting all this stuff from this team, and it kind of sounds like DevOps. And I thought, well, I think I've heard of that. DevOps. My boss says, well, you're it. Go figure it out. What's DevOps? Well, it's been an interesting year. This is my 8th conference. I've been to New York, San Francisco twice, Vegas, Pittsburgh, all over, talking to some very smart people, reading some very interesting books. And so this is kind of a distillation of my first year with DevOps. Before we get started into DevOps, first we have to do a little history. So come, take a journey with me into the past. Let's see if this works. 1995. That's 20 years ago. If it makes you feel old, don't worry, it's because you are, like me. Okay, what's going on in 1995? Well, I'll tell you what. It sure was a pretty cool time to know anything about computers, wasn't it? We were changing the world, right? You knew we were onto something because the suits are showing up to our garages going, wow, look, a napkin with internet written on it. Somebody give this guy some money. Oh my goodness, it's a whiteboard with stuff on it. Somebody write this guy a check. An actual computer running, Netscape? Beep, beep, back the truck up, Jim, give these folks some money. And of course, we belly up to the bar at these companies. What's up? Marketing, procurement, manufacturing, accounting, executive management? We're IT, right? And we were welcomed with open arms, cutoffs, flip-flops, and piercings, and tattoos, and all. Because, of course, they had things they wanted to automate. So we really were, whole new businesses, whole new concepts. Webmaster, who ever heard of that before 1995? So we're feeling like this guy, right? We can do IT. See what I did there? All right. Well, this is great. Let's get back into the Wayback Machine and go 5 years ahead from there. What's going on? Are we still killing it? Are we still nailing it? Maybe not so much. You can't really compare IT to marketing or procurement or manufacturing or those things, but simply on the basis of meeting our commitments, on doing what we said we're going to do. The emperor's feeling a bit of a draft, It's no wonder that this is about the time the dot-com boom went bust, right? So we're always late. We're always over budget. We never deliver what the client asks for or what they need. Not that they know the difference, but isn't it our job to help them figure that out? No, unfortunately, at this point, the companies, we're feeling, honestly, if we look at ourselves honestly, and more importantly, the business is kind of seeing us a little bit more like this guy. We are a liability. We're a cost center. We're not killing it. We're not even doing a good job. We're around because they can't go back to slide rules. Pure and simple. They can't compete without us. All right, well, let's get back in the Wayback Machine and go 1 year further from here. What's going on in 2001, other than a space odyssey? Okay, well, A group of smart people got together and they figured that the reason we're not delivering is because we're focused on the wrong things. We're valuing the wrong things. You guys probably know what I'm talking about here. Let's not stand on ceremony. The Agile Manifesto is signed. And boy, I tell you what, it didn't take long for it to catch on, did it? Developers hear about this stuff and they're going, "Ooh, Agile? Agile, wow." And then the next thing you know, management hears all about it and it's, "Oh, Agile, Agile, wow." And then, of course, executive management hears all about it, and it's Agile, 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 right? That's enough of that. We got it. We can do it this time. We got this, right? Kanban boards are flying through user stories, and remember extreme programming, pair programming? It's like brotherly love. And for a moment, it was like Woodstock. And then, one fateful day, some program manager looked over another project manager's shoulder and said, "What are you doing there? That's not Agile." Send in the trolls. And up starts the bickering fight over this is Agile and that's not Agile, and no, I'm Agile, you're not Agile, and no, it's only Agile if it meets these 15 criteria, and no, follow me, for only I've got the true Agile religion. So, cast we were into the valley of disillusionment. We all realized that Mondays still suck. Pointy-haired bosses still don't understand what we do. So what did we do? Did we pack it up, go home, go back to waterfall? Did we? Raise your hand if you've been on an Agile team within the last year. Look to your right, look to your left. If you see somebody not raising their hand, they're ops. Hi, ops! Actually, I'm kidding. Ops uses Agile too, just in different ways. Why? Because here we are 15 years later, and finally, Agile's legit. Agile has plenty to offer us, right? All the Kanban boards and user stories and epics and t-shirt sizes, in fact, it's reached this pinnacle of methodological achievement and visibility. We don't have to think about it anymore. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4 Agile, what is that? It's just kind of getting your Agile groove on. We just do it. We don't have to think about it anymore. However, Agile did not take the ball all the way to the end zone. It's good stuff. It's really powerful stuff. But when it comes to software development, that's about all it has to say, right? Agile is wonderful for getting that idea to requirements, to software development, to testing, we hope. We live in hope, right? And there it is in the test environment. So are we done? Is that it? No. There are much bigger problems to do with software delivery. And the question is, what are those problems? And the answer might just be DevOps. So here we are at DevOps. So basics. The word was originally coined by Patrick Du Bois in 2009. And in that year, he put on the first DevOps days in Belgium. And they say that there's nothing like an idea whose time has come. So in that very same year, John Allspot and John Hammond from Flickr did a presentation at the Velocity conference, partly titled 10 Deploys a Day at Flickr. Now, if you know anything about Amazon or Netflix, you know that 10 deploys a day is not really a big deal in today's terms. But at the time, it was probably immoral. It could be illegal. It was definitely insane, right? How could you possibly do 10 deploys a day? The seminal work publication on DevOps in general is the Phoenix Project, published in 2013. And then Gene Kim, one of the co-authors, last year in October, did the DevOps Enterprise Summit in San Francisco. I had an opportunity to present there, and I learned some wonderful things from some very smart people. Gene says that you're about as smart as the average of the 5 smartest people you know, and I have to agree. So here we are, DevOps, right? Almost 6 years ago, this whole thing gets started. So why is it that so many of us are just hearing about it for the first time, right? At this point in the Agile story, it's going bonkers, wildfire. So what's the deal? Basically, DevOps is far bigger than Agile. Agile is a critical component of DevOps. But when it comes to Agile, right, a team can take up Agile pretty much independently. They don't need permission, they don't need clearance, and they don't really need millions of dollars in tools, right? You can build a Kanban board out of a whiteboard, or a piece of cardboard, or an Excel spreadsheet, right? So DevOps is much bigger. DevOps is much broader. It is cross-functional. And in order to work, it needs buy-in from pretty much everybody. So as an industry, where does that put us with DevOps? What about here? DevOps? Oh, wow, DevOps. Stop. Everybody, let's take a deep cleansing breath. That's better. I know you want to see me jumping up and down this stage again, but I don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Why? Because DevOps has got some amazing things to offer. But if it gets buried in the hype, we're going to lose it. So come take a journey with me. Let's see if we can jump the valley. Let's see if we can boil DevOps down to its bare essentials, separate the hype from the myth, from the reality, and see if we can get something out of DevOps sometime before now in, I don't know, 2030? What do you say? Let's get started. Okay, 1,000 words on DevOps. Don't worry, what can we use for 1,000 words? How about a picture? I love this picture. I have unashamedly stolen it from at least 2 other presentations because it does such a wonderful job of telling the story of DevOps, the core of the story of DevOps, in a single image. It's terrific, okay? So here comes the audience participation. We're going to play a little game. We're going to do a little word association, okay? I'm going to say a word or 2, and you're going to just reflect on how it makes you feel, okay? Ops, you're up first. If you've ever been in ops, here we go. Production deployment, right? Release day. Does it make you happy? Does it put a smile on your face? Or is it maybe just a little bit more like this?
Message for you, son.
Yeah, head of ops is basically chief spear catcher. Tell me if this seems familiar. Okay, ops team, here we are. Version 4.8 is coming in from QA today. Everybody line up behind me. We wouldn't want them to miss. Send it over, guys. Yeah, right, because when it breaks in production, and it do, don't it? What are they going to call? Dev? No. Sometimes, maybe, if you're lucky. But no, most of the times, when it comes to ops, you guys are the ones with the pagers and the cell phones. You guys are the ones on call. You guys are the ones up at 3 a.m. in the morning on Memorial Day Friday trying to figure out whether it's your roads or their cars, your platforms or their software blowing stuff up at the intersections. Could you fix it if you had access to the code? Probably not. Do you have access to the code? Almost certainly not. Does it make sense? No. But I don't have to tell you, all too often, that's the way it is. Okay? Here we go. Next up, devs. Word association. And change management. Is it your favorite thing that you do? Is it the best 50-field form you fill out every day? Or is it a misery? It's a misery. Why? I just told you. Ops is on the hook for every time you go push something out to production. And so they're going to get and collude with compliance and governance and audit and cybersecurity to make it as painfully slow as possible to get anything out to production. Sign these 5 forms in triplicate in only the bluest unicorn blood, and we shall consider your application for production deploy, right? So they stand on the bridge between QA and production going, "You shall not pass." Why? Why does it have to suck so bad? The answer, when you think about it, is actually pretty straightforward. Dev and ops are held to competing incentives. Dev is about speed, agile, quick, everybody, come on, time is money, get that stuff out to production, yeehaw. Ops is about stability. We've got an SLA to meet. You say SLA to a developer, they think you're mis-selling salad, right? Ops is incentivized to keep things stable. And every time you go rocking the boat, their bonuses are on the line, literally, in many cases. So, lesson number 1 of DevOps. We're breaking it up here. DevOps is about cooperation and understanding between dev and ops, right? Starting with dev and ops, right? So, all too often, dev and ops is like oil and water. DevOps is the soap. You're saying, Dave, that's real cute. What does it actually mean? Well, let's take a look. So you can't talk about DevOps without talking about Agile. You can't talk about Agile without talking about Lean. Lean is where it all really starts. Can anybody tell me where Lean came from originally? Lean manufacturing, where? Toyota. A really bright guy named Taiichi Ohno figured out how to take Toyota and Japanese production in general from about matching US car production to at about 8 cars a minute with lousy quality to about 14 a minute, almost double. And here's the more important point. At higher quality, much higher quality. How is this possible? Same people, same money, same factory, same parts, better quality, more cars, right? How is this possible? Well, it comes from lean, and lean is based on a few key insights. And that first key insight we'll talk about is the value stream. We've all heard of the value stream, right? Basically, you take a bunch of random stuff I don't really care about on one end, add value to it through a sequence of events in the form of time, people, training, research and development, facilities. And out the other end, you get something I'm willing to spend $20 or $30, $40,000 on in the form of a car. How does this affect software? What does this have to do with software? Software delivery is a value stream. Except instead of bins full of parts on one end, I have an idea. I have a business process that I want to automate, right? And it goes through a series of cycles. I add value to it in the form of business analysis and requirements gathering and code and then test, again, we hope, right? And eventually it gets released and goes to production and then goes through another cycle over and over and over. Right. So lesson number 2 of DevOps is that DevOps is the application of lean and agile value principles across the value stream. So that's one principle. What are the others? Well, let's dig in. What's this? Kanban board, right? That's easy. We all use Kanban boards as agilists. What's it for? Seems like a simple question, doesn't it? Sound off. Let's hear it. What is this for? Visibility. Visibility. Tracking status of tasks. What? Who said that? Well done. I don't even have to give you the hint. Here was my hint. Flow control. It's about controlling the flow of work through the system. Do I care how much is in that middle column there? WIP, right? Now, work in progress? Is that important? Yes, it's very important. How much do I want in there? As much as I can handle at one time. Based on the number of developers and the complexity of the stories that I'm working on, it's very important that I control the flow of work. All right? So what's a good example of a value stream that we can work with? Something really simple. How about this? Are we there yet? Why is this not working? There we go. That's a value stream. You wouldn't think of a highway as a value stream, but it actually is. It's got an input, the on-ramp. It's got a process. It produces translation. And it's got an output, the off-ramp. So what do we notice about this particular value stream, this particular highway? It's barely, underutilized, slack, very good. What did we build this thing for? Look at all this wasted capacity. Time, environmental impact, money. It should be a dirt road, right? What time is it here, do you think? Maybe 2 p.m., right? On a holiday, right? So, and then you've probably all seen this XKCD cartoon, right? The only good excuse not to be working. Traditional companies that are not adopting lean practices in general, think of slack time. And idle time is bad. What am I paying you for? Right? The good old Dilbert, pointy-haired, you'd better be working, except for the 15 minutes I give you to go to a bathroom break and eat every day, your fingers better be flying, no matter what, right? Okay, pointy hair, you get your wish. 100% utilization. What do we call that on a highway? Exactly. Boy, you guys are sharp. Parking lot. Are we getting anything done here? No. The only time anything gets done in that scenario is when loudmouth executive number 15 comes barreling through the dev pit. My feature didn't make it through and my customers are pissed. Everybody stop what you're doing or you're all fired. We're going to work on my thing right now. And that ambulance runs right up through. Everybody parts ways. And then the logjam just closes in behind it. Right? Typical pathology. What's the alternative? Some parts of the country, you have this. It's an on-ramp with a street light. We're controlling the flow of work into the system, right? And that is a critical aspect of Lean, it's a critical aspect of Agile, and it's a critical aspect of DevOps. Let's take another example and talk a little bit more about another principle. Here's a question. Does adding memory to a computer make it faster? That's a trick question, right? It's a typical kind of a noob question, but the technical answer is no. Your processor's not faster, your clock isn't any faster. Why then is it that when I added 2 whole gigs to my wife's brand new 2 gig computer, little teeny desktop thingy for Facebook and email and to run her business, was she thrilled? Wow, it's usable now. Chrome, it doesn't lock up on me. I can use it for Facebook and email. Why? The memory is a constraint, okay? And this is another key critical aspect to the systems thinking that goes to DevOps and Lean, right? The thing about constraints is that they deeply affect the flow of work through the system. And any change you make to any part of that system that is not at the constraint will have no effect on throughput. And that is our next lesson. Efficiency improvements before or after the constraints will have no effect on throughput. Case in point, if I had a faster processor, is it going to help? Not really. How about a solid state drive? Maybe a little, but when a system is starved for memory, what's it doing? It's paging to disk. Those are writes, right? SSDs are great for reads, but not so great for writes. So for 4 times the cost, I might make a marginal improvement, or with 1 stick of RAM, I can revolutionize her system, right? And take a crappy little $200 box, add another $50 to it, and it's perfectly usable. The same applies to software delivery. If you try to improve the system without understanding where your constraints are, your throughput will be unaffected. All right, so now let's talk about defects, because defects is another big aspect. And let's go back to our manufacturing metaphor. Okay, so how did Ford and Toyota and Nissan and all these guys before Lean handle defects? Something on the line's moving along and the car comes by and there's something wrong. Basically, they didn't. They might chalk it up, send it to the broke lot. Hopefully we'll get to it later, right? What's the result of that policy? Parking lots full of broken cars, right? So one of the key insights, if you're lucky, the dealer might find a problem. In many cases, it was the lucky customer who got to find out that the car was broken the day it rolled off the line, right? And the reason being because, we've got a quota to fill, people. Let's keep this line moving. You talk to a line manager and you say, stopped line in the middle of a day, the image they have in their heads is bags full of burning cash. Don't ever stop that line. Turns out, and if you were in James' BDD talk, you remember what happens to defects as they flow down the line? What happens to the cost to fix? It goes way up. So it turns out that it is so much more efficient to fix that defect the instant you find it, and you should be looking at every stage, that it is better to stop the line, triage the problem, swarm it, fix it, and get the line moving again. There you have the end-on cord, right? Workers are trained at lean manufacturing companies to stop the entire line. Broken taillight, scratched windshield, it doesn't matter. Stop the line. It's counterintuitive, but it works. So our next rule is, lesson number 5, never allow defects to flow down the line. How does that affect software delivery? Never go home on a broken build. Be looking for defects as early in the process as you possibly can, and never ever say, well, we'll just put a fix on the backlog. Take it out, fix it. It does not go past that stage at all until it's fixed, or it gets pulled off. And you can have a conversation with the business about that. We have a defect here. We can either pause development and reprioritize, or we can take the time needed to fix it. All right, so at this point, we're past the technical stuff about DevOps, all the mechanical stuff. And now we're going to get to the hard part. And the hard part is the human aspect, right? This is the part of DevOps you won't find in Agile or Lean. This is the soft skill human aspect. Okay? Anybody know what these are? Sneeches. You're thinking, Dave, you were hanging out with your kids when you did this, and you have a typo here. Why do you have sneeches on your slide? Let's find out. Now, the star-belly sneeches had bellies with stars. The plain belly sneeches had none upon theirs. The stars were a sign of riches and wealth, but were really so small, you might think such a thing wouldn't matter at all. But because they had stars, all the star-belly sneeches would brag we're the freest sneeches walking the beaches. With snoots in the air, they'd sniff and they'd snort. Jobs. They're for you plain belly sort. And whenever they met some, when they were out walking, they'd hike right on past them without even talking. This is the silo, right? This is the part where, as professionals, you spend a lot of time learning your craft. And that is a long and somewhat painful process that you're rightfully proud of. So when it comes to taking input from other people about the work that you have done or the work that you do, we generally tolerate people we respect, which means if you do exactly what I do, if I'm a dev and you're a dev, if I'm ops and you're ops, if I'm security and you're security, I will tolerate, maybe even invite your advice, up to the point of an actual code review, at which point, no, I really am not so interested in what you have to say. My code, my baby, okay? My baby's not ugly. Folks, in general, across the board, end to end, top down, left, right, we have to get the stars off our bellies, the chips off our shoulders, and learn how to take input from people who don't do what we do. Ops, devs, let's start with devs. Your ops people at your company will give you a heaping, helping earful of what it's like to support your code on their platforms, okay? I know far too many devs who aren't much interested in what it means for their systems to run on a given platform. I've got the Liberty profile. I'm good with IIS Express. I'm good. No, that cannot work. You have to take ownership for the entire cycle, writing the code, testing the code, and understanding what it means to operationalize. And there are trends coming in the industry, by the way, we'll talk about, that make that even more important. It's called shift left, okay? So we talked about our devs. Ops, if your job more often than not feels like chief OK clicker, if creating 20 instances of a Red Hat or a Windows server means grabbing the run book and running the same manual step of 20 steps every single time to like 400 steps, if you're making direct changes to production, stop the madness. Automate. It is absolutely critical. You cannot be DevOps or frankly Agile or any of it without automation. And there are free open source systems out there with processes begging for automation. However, what do you need to know how to use those systems? A little bit of Groovy, a little bit of Grails, a little bit of Ruby, a little bit of JavaScript, not C++ pointery object-oriented nonsense, but you better learn how to script. It's important. Okay, where can we learn how to do that? Devs, teach your ops people how to automate. Ops, teach your devs about what it means to run their code on your platforms, and be ready to hear about it from each other, because that is how we get to the point of DevOps. Because all too often, things are a little bit like this, right? Don't tell me how to do my job. I spent umpteen bajillion years learning how to do this stuff. My code is sacrosanct. No. All right? So here we start to get to the point of DevOps, right? And what is the point? What are we trying to achieve here? Lesson number 6 is communication, respect, and knowledge sharing is critical to DevOps. You're not going to find this in a book necessarily. There's no technology for this. It's about people. And at the end of the day, that is the differentiator. All right? So we've got our flow, right? Things are moving from work center to work center. A work center is where you bolt in the engine, or you bolt in the, glue in the windshield, or what have you, or you write your requirements, or you do your test scripts, or whatever, right? Those are where something happens by some person. You've got feedback. People feedback, actual people in rooms talking to each other, and systems feedback, right? So when a defect happens, it gets linked back to a user story. Traceability, visibility. What does this add up to? What are we trying to achieve? If this thing will, yeah, velocity. So we all know when it comes to Agile that that's kind of the point, but when it comes to DevOps, velocity takes you all the way to production, right? It's no longer just about writing the code and getting it to test, because no one ever made a dime on code sitting in test. You have to get it on a production system and running somewhere where the business can start to see it function. The thing is, with velocity, when you talk about innovation, every new feature that you introduce is like a little startup. And guess what? Most startups fail, right? So the cost of failure in a waterfall model, which, by the way, is where you are, if you can be agile, if you don't have the end-to-end automation and everything that you get with DevOps, yeah, sure, I'm doing 2-week sprints, but it takes me 6 months to get a new server, in our data center, right? What good does that do you, right? So every single little feature that you introduce, and most features, by the way, you won't know how successful they are until they're out there. A and B testing, that kind of thing. So do we want our cost of innovation, our cost of trying new things to be high or low? How is the cost affected by time? At the end of the day, cycle time has a great impact on the cost of innovation. You cannot try new things if trying new things means wind it up, set it down, maybe it makes it. You want to be able to do the McDonald's way. You want to be able to say, oh, you want to try something else? Okay, sure, no problem. We can put that on the backlog, get it into sprint X, and it'll be in production in however long it takes based on your projections, but a whole lot less than it would be in waterfall, right? And so the cost of innovation, instead of this long plotting process, it's order up. Let's try it. If it fails, it's not such a big deal. Try again. All right, so to summarize, lesson number 7 is DevOps. The goal of DevOps is velocity, delivering fast while maintaining quality. Zuckerberg said, move fast and break things. We're not all in that. We're not all Facebook, right? Some of us just simply can't afford to allow things to break. So that's what DevOps offers us. So DevOps is, first and foremost, about communication, right? It's about systems that are linked together, talking to each other. It's about people that are linked together, talking to each other, breaking down those silos and getting used to getting input from how you do what you do from other people who have a stake in what you do. It is also automation. The systems that support that automation are important, but the key is the automation itself. And you can pick from any one or all of these systems or others. The point is automate. I don't care if it's Chef or PowerShell. It's not important. And finally, transformation. And this is the cultural aspect. If you've ever been at a company that has taken up Agile for the first time, you know that the cultural shift is a big deal. Getting across to a business person who could care less about technology in general, the idea that you are now the product owner. You are ultimately responsible for the success of the system on the business side. That's a big shift in thinking, right? You get similar and even bigger, broader shifts in thinking when you talk about DevOps because it requires buy-in and subscription at every level. Let's dispel a few myths. DevOps ain't. It ain't a product. You cannot go buy it off a shelf, okay? And there's people out there that will try to sell it to you that way. But you cannot buy a cultural transformation, okay? It has to be grown. It's not a person, a team, or a role. It's about breaking down silos, not creating a new team and going and sending them off in the corner and saying, you're the DevOps guys now. And now we have an extra step and a layer of abstraction in everything we do. The only way it makes sense to have individuals, a slice of your company set up for DevOps, is if their job is to go infect the rest of the company and basically make themselves obsolete. But you cannot just create a new silo. And finally, it is not just continuous delivery or continuous integration. That is a critical component, but there's far more to it than that, as we see with the human aspect. All right, so do's and don'ts. Being DevOps. Why am I saying being DevOps? Well, because DevOps is an adjective. It's not a verb. You don't do Agile. You are Agile, right? DevOps is the same thing. So align your Dev and Ops missions, do continuous delivery and deployment. That's a competency unto itself. And evaluate your current processes. That's a really important one. In your homework, yeah, there's homework. Don't worry, you'll enjoy it. There's a story in one of the books about a parts company that has this heat treat system. You put the parts through it, and they require it for hardening, right? Sorry, hardening, yeah, I know. So they've looked at their processes, and they figured out that 20% of the parts that were going through the system didn't need it. This is a constraint, right? Some parts absolutely have to have it. It has to happen in a certain order, and it can only handle so many parts at a time. So 20% of that constraint was wasted by changing their process and questioning the engineering that went into the decisions to put certain parts through. They were able to reclaim 20% and improve their throughput. Don't create a new silo, okay? Don't attempt to buy it off the shelf. There are lots of companies out there who will tell you that they do your DevOps for you, DevOps in the cloud, DevOps as a service. The systems can be in the cloud. The culture cannot. And finally, don't attempt to dictate it from the top down or the bottom up, right? It is a cultural shift, and everyone has to be subscribed, okay? So, on to your homework. I recommend these resources in this order. The Phoenix Project, Gene Kim, George Spafford, and Kevin Baer, is actually inspired by The Goal by Eli Goldratt. They are similar stories about similar things. One is IT focused, one is manufacturing focused. And The Goal is a bit dated, making a phone call means finding a quarter. But it's kind of quaint that way, and it is really a truly wonderful grounding in the concepts of lean. And then if you read them both in that order, first the Phoenix Project and The Goal, you have a wonderful, very deep grounding in the concepts that underlie DevOps. And now the DevOps Enterprise Summit last October, all of the presentations from that conference are on YouTube. If you read them, if you consume it in that order, the DevOps Enterprise Summit presentations are kind of 201 level. You kind of assume that you know some things about DevOps. If you do it in that order, it's wonderful, wonderful resource. Okay, so the title is Ends in and Why Coders Should Care. So at this point you're going, Dave, this is all great stuff, but it's just the new shiny object, right? It's Gartner's new cool thing, hype cycle and all that. Maybe, but I don't think so. Honestly, I think DevOps is coming. I don't think I'm going to be the last person you hear about DevOps from this year. Okay? How do you know DevOps is coming, Dave? How do you know DevOps? Oh, thanks for asking. Well, at the DevOps Enterprise Summit, there were some really big companies doing it. Gene Kim has this concept of the horses and the unicorns. The unicorns are Google, Netflix, Etsy, big, huge companies that can, we need a compiler. I'll just write one. Okay, no problem. Well, we need a release automation system. Oh, we'll just build one. Right? These are the unicorns. These are the guys who live in the fantasy land. They have all the money in the world, and they can do whatever, and they have the best minds on the planet from a technical perspective. The rest of us are horses, right? Big companies, Fortune 500 companies. And personally, if you're regulated in healthcare or banking, I think of you as an elephant, right? You cannot turn on a dime. So who could tell me what's the one company that was on the S&P 500 the day the first bell rang and is still there today? Any guesses? Huh? No, close. GE. GE was there. They're doing DevOps in a big way. Think about a company that big and that old. It's been on that index for that long. They must be pretty good at reinventing themselves, right? They must be pretty good at taking up those new practices from those whippersnappers they keep hiring in from the colleges. They're doing DevOps in a very big way. Okay, so what's the last type of institution you can imagine taking up something as progressive as DevOps? Old hidebound institution. Government, very good. The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services handles all legal immigration to this country. Mark Schwartz, the CIO, was at the DevOps Enterprise Summit, and he said they couldn't do what they do without it. It was one of my favorite presentations, very funny. There's a couple, few more small companies you may have heard of that are also doing DevOps. And so it's really here to stay, I think. I think it is the new way of doing business, even at the large companies, even at the horses. And here's the thing. Because it's coming, I think you at least want to know what it's all about so that you can separate the hype and you understand, what's going on when someone comes and tells you, especially, from some other group or from a consultancy. You have your own opinions, form your own opinions about it, because if you don't, he will. You do not want this guy doing your DevOps for you. because the only thing he knows about DevOps is what the vendors tell him, okay? And if you're lucky and you let this guy deliver your DevOps for you, this is the DevOps you'll get, okay? I say this is lucky because it assumes that he even addresses the human aspect. He's not like, he won't even tell you get along. He'll just say, oh, you got Puppet and Chef. Jenkins, cool, you're good. We know better, right? That's not true. You've got to have the human aspect. Everyone has to be on board. All right, so next up, you need DevOps. Well, that seems kind of presumptuous, Dave. Why do I need DevOps? Here's a more important question. Why do I need IT? That's one of those questions, right? Like, what's a Kanban board for? This seems pretty simple. Oh, of course I know what IT is for. It's for making money. That's what companies do. That's what business units are for, right? I mean, we're all about earning a dollar. Are we, as an industry? There's another one of those questions, right? Seems obvious. Of course we make money. Of course Google and Netflix and Etsy and all these big companies and you know, the Fortune 500 companies, absolutely we're profitable. Not so much. If you step all the way back and you look at the aggregated GDP scoped global, or just let's say the US, all of those details, all of those little projects and individual companies, as big as Google is, if you step that far back, all those little variances fade into the background, and you're lucky to get a 3 to 5 year ROI. It sounds counterintuitive, right? But it's true. In fact, it is so prevalent in academic circles. It is the known thing based on study after study that it has a name. It's called the productivity paradox. Billions of dollars spent every year on all this IT stuff, and we're lucky to get our money back in 3 to 5 years. So last year, the very first State of DevOps report was conducted. There's Gene Kim, co-author of the Phoenix Project, Nigel Kirsten from Puppet, and Ches Humble from Chef, led by Dr. Nicole Forsgren, formerly of the John Huntsman School of Business at Utah State. She just recently joined Chef. And on a hunch, Dr. Forsgren introduced some questions about productivity and revenue into this study, flying in the face of all the received wisdom and studies about there is no ROI. On a hunch, she just put them in, and the data that came back was really compelling. For the first time, possibly ever, we have a study here where the data clearly indicates a direct and immediate correlation between IT spend and productivity. Let that sink in for a second. I'm going to say it again because it could be the most important thing I say today. For the first time possibly ever, a rigorous academic study headed for peer review has in the data indicated a direct and immediate correlation between not just IT spend and productivity, but revenue based on the 10K statements of the public companies that responded. This was one of my favorite presentations at this summit, and I went to her afterwards and I said, Dr. Forsgren, this is incredible. She said, you think? I said, this could change a lot of things. She goes, I know. And I thought about it for a while, and I came to a realization. I shared it with her, and she agrees. Smart investors read research, right? That's what they do. And so it's just not that hard to imagine a Warren Buffett type or a hedge fund manager or investment banker on an earnings call or in a boardroom or in a corner CEO's office saying, it says here that you no longer have any excuse for a lack of return on our money for your IT spend. What's your DevOps strategy? Am I crazy? Am I overstating the case? Maybe, but the data was pretty clear. High-performing IT organizations were twice as likely to exceed market share and productivity goals and had a 50% higher market cap over 3 years. Incidentally, if your CFO wants to understand this stuff, I'm thinking start here, because this is pretty compelling stuff. All right, so finally, you want DevOps. Once again, Dave, a little presumptuous, right? You're telling me I want DevOps. Why do I want DevOps? Well, let's do another association, right? Except this time, we'll do it with an image. What does this image evoke in you? What do you think about when you see this? I think of stifling conformity, pathological organization that believes that you can make people move faster by pushing harder. And honestly, I think of the Death March. You know, darkened conference rooms filled shoulder to shoulder with developers sitting at bright screens, 5 days of stubble, smelling of pizza and desperation. Or so I'm told, not that I've ever been there, I've never done anything like that, but you get the idea. What's the opposite of this? What's the opposite of this type of pathology? These are hackathons, right? What is it we love about hackathons? Hackathons are my favorite thing in the world. Why? What is it that's so awesome about a hackathon? Apart from the social aspect, right, where we get to sit around and hang out with people who understand us and appreciate what we do, and understand what we do and get our jokes. Love Firefly, right? What is it about a hackathon that's so much fun? You get to show up, conceive of an idea, write some code, test it, and get it in front of a user in 48 hours. What's not to love about that, right? You get to actually see something that you've worked hard on functioning, and you get that light in the eye, right? That if we're lucky as developers, we get a couple times in our career where a user sits in front of it. It's a bit like being a chef where you spend most of your time sweating in the back, right? And every now and then you might walk through the dining room area and somebody might say, hey, great job, right? Here, we get instant feedback. Now, can we have this at every company? At all the big Fortune 500 companies? Maybe, maybe not, but I can dream, can't I? In all seriousness, at the end of the day, DevOps is a means to an end. It's not just about the technology. Don't get me wrong. I love technology. But at the end of the day, DevOps is about having a life. It's about work-life balance. It's about being able to turn around, walk out the door at 5 p.m., and know that the entire building's not going to burst into flames behind you like the end of a John Woo movie, right? And that, to me, is the core and the heart of DevOps. If you go read the books on DevOps, and I hope you do, trust me, these are not just dry technical books, okay? I just made it most of the way through the O'Reilly Git book, and it was a character-building exercise. I needed that information, but it's not fun, right? These are fictional stories about fictional people in real situations, and I promise you, you have been at least 2 or 3 of those characters in that book, right? These are about guys who want to go home to their families before their kids forget what they look like, or your Xbox, or your kids, or your cat, or whatever blows your hair back, right? We're not going to judge. Whatever it is that you do, you want to be able to go in, work hard, do good work, see the results of that work before you retire, and then go off and do all the other things that you do that make you who you are. Okay? And at the end of the day, that's what DevOps is about for me. It's about that work-life balance. It's about the human aspect. It's why I'm passionate about it. It's why I believe that it is coming, and I hope that it has a positive effect on companies all over the world. And it's why I hope that this begins your DevOps journey. And that's all I've got, folks. Thank you very much. I've got time for some questions, I think. Looks like did I end? Yeah, it looks like I got time for questions. This went a little quicker than usual. Any questions? Yes? What if your company is focused on selling software in the marketplace? That is a different situation. You can still benefit from DevOps, absolutely, no question. But it's a different situation because most companies don't profit from software directly. Software is an enabler. In some ways, you're at an advantage because you know software, you understand it, so it shouldn't be a hard sell to use systems to automate things. But on the other hand, sometimes, especially if you're building software in a consultancy mode, you can be under a lot of pressure to move quickly in ways that other more traditional companies are not.
My clients are eventually going to get into DevOps. How do I prepare for that?
How do you prepare a company for DevOps? So there's a number of ways. And it's similar to Agile in terms of preparation. There's a technological aspect, and there's a human aspect, and a communications aspect. And you have to address both. A company has to be ready in some ways And you kind of know as a consultancy whether or not a company is ready to make certain changes. If they're already they've said they want to go to DevOps. That's the first step. Because DevOps is relatively new, they don't always understand what that really means. And frankly, it's new enough that a lot of people can disagree on what it means to do DevOps. My presentation at the DevOps Enterprise Summit is on YouTube, and I talk a lot about how to explain DevOps to different stakeholders. Because the executives are going to want to hear about different things than the testers, than the developers, than the network people. Everybody has a different perspective. And at a high level, what I recommend is that target your message. Do your executive summary to the executives, talk about it to the developers, and target that message originally, separately, so that everybody understands how DevOps affects them. Then bring a core group, what I like to call like a core sample. Some executives, some managers, some devs, some testers, some support people, some ops people, all together, and do a working session on what DevOps means for that company. And with an understanding that there is no prescription. That's the critical part, is that the DevOps that Kevin Bear, paraphrasing, said the DevOps you bake yourself is going to taste far better than the DevOps somebody tries to bake for you. So you can guide that conversation at any company. And you have to know what you're really going for, right? You have to prioritize. And you're not going to boil the ocean. You're not going to fix everything all at once. But you can take and understand what your roadmap is. Here's where we want to be: a year, 3 years, 5 years. And then there's that continuous improvement aspect where you keep looking at what you're doing. Are we on track? Are we achieving what we want to achieve? Constantly shifting and reprioritizing as it goes. Question?
Your IT department's partially or fully outsourced to the cloud.
Uh-huh. Not at all. No. So if your services, if your systems are in the cloud, then let's see. So DevOps, you can accommodate DevOps practices, right? There's the cultural aspect, which is the communication stuff. Doesn't matter where your systems are. If your systems are in the cloud, that may complicate certain things like continuous integration, right? Continuous delivery. And many companies find themselves in the cloud is a hybrid situation where you have certain systems on-prem, certain systems in the cloud. And if you don't have a good strategy for how to mix those two together, it can complicate things. So it's largely an engineering thing, right? Where you have to figure out, well, we know we need to be doing continuous integration. What are our limitations, and what solutions can we build for that? And it's an engineering strategy issue, because you have to figure out how do we combine that cloud aspect with our on-prem aspect and get them, avoiding a big mess of firewall rules and embedded systems, right? And that's what it ends up being. So that's a good point about the cloud, is your cloud strategy is very important from an engineering perspective in order to realize the CD aspects. Yes?
I was curious if you could give us a picture of what DevOps in your organization, looks like in the day-to-day.
So I can't talk specifically about PNC, but I can talk about industry standards. So when you talk about, there is a set of disciplines, right, when it comes to software delivery. There's requirements management, there's source control, continuous integration, automated release management, requirements management, ADLM, right, Agile management, Rally version 1, CollabNet, a whole universe of systems, right? And then there's the policies behind them. And there's governance and compliance. And if you're working at a healthcare or banking, there's regulatory. So basically, there's the engineering side, there's the developer side, and the engineering and ops is kind of combined together. And then there's the developer side, and then there's process. So depending on the organization, the way your company is organized, DevOps will mean different things to different companies, very different. And to that point, you can't just go find a DevOps expert, lift and shift them into your organization, and be done. Because even someone experienced in DevOps is going to have to relearn what it means to do it in that organization. So the basic DevOps principles apply fairly universally, but they're very high level. What it means to grow a DevOps practice at a particular company is going to be very specific to that company. So the background in DevOps, someone who's been doing DevOps for some time, has value, but not instant value, right? There's still going to be that process of them understanding the organization and then a commitment on the part of the organization to make the changes. And that's where DevOps adoption, similar to Agile, can be a bit of an uphill climb at first, because folks are used to going out and saying, well, we need an HR system. Ching, right? Go buy it, right? Shrink wrapped. You can't shrink wrap DevOps. Does that kind of help answer your question?
Kind of, I guess I was thinking about, obviously, like you said, it's customized for every organization, but is, a frequent thing to do, maybe like, common stand-ups, integrate the new disciplines, organizing the cross-functional teams around a single project?
Yes. Those are common. And a lot of it, if you just think of DevOps to some degree as extending the Agile values all the way to the end, then you can reuse a lot of those concepts. So if you're Agile, reuse the stand-up concept. Cross-functional, cross-training is actually another common theme. And that's not to say that you have to cross-train, right? You can still, what I like to say is that DevOps isn't about doing different work, it's about working differently, right? So you understand the challenges of an ops person, but you still write code. I'm not going to get an ops person and teach them code and expect them to do my code reviews, but they are going to understand the code well enough, hopefully, to understand my challenges and to start using the automation systems, because there's a convergence happening. If you have administrator in your title these days, the days of basically patching servers is coming to an end. The administrative title is shifting over to what they call site reliability engineer. And that has a lot more to do with systems engineering and quite a bit of code, actually. And so as an operations person, if you take up some basic scripting classes, some basic scripting concepts, that's going to make you a lot more marketable and a lot more valuable to an organization, because you can handle the automation aspects of the engineering that are now coming at light speed. Sure. Other questions? All right. Well, I'll be down here for a little while longer, so if anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to come up. Thanks.